Bring the Kadosh, Erev Tov. We are continuing with the Kinyan Masechta, the He Amud Aleph 5A 2 or 3 even. Yeah, 5A 2 or 3. But basically, we're on He, where we just spoke about Mai Haloch Yelechu V'Achon Osem Shechazara. So Rav Yudah said it was referring to the shore. That Keshu Choresh, that when he's going and he's going to be plowing, Olech uboche, he's going and he's crying. But when he's coming back, right? Ochel chaziz minatelem, he's eating from the top part of the tvua, and that's what it means. That he's coming with joy. What does that mean? That he's actually coming and he's rejoicing. Meaning when he's going and he's starting the planting, he's actually very hungry. So imagine the shore, he's dropping the seeds there, but he wants to cry. Then afterwards, all of a sudden, what happens? He is all happy and jolly. Okay. So says the Gemara, what does it mean now? So he comes and he says, why? Because the tvuah that they had to eat, it already says, Berina yiktoru. Berina yiktoru means they're going to reap with rina, with rejoice. So what does it mean then? He's going to carry, right? How do you say the lumotechem? No, there's a better. It's the sheets. Thank you. So Amar Rav Chasta says Rav Chasta, the Amli Lav and Matzita Tana, right? And some people say that they actually learned it in a Braita. Kaneh zeret shibolet zratayim, which means this tevua, this grain, was not like every normal grain. Usually, how are the grains? You have a long sheet, right? You have a long stick, and then the food, which is the kernels, is at the top. What's the size usually in proportion? It's 10 to 1, right? 6 to 4, whatever you want. It's mamash, right? It's what? It's even less than a proportion. Yeah, it's mamash. It's very small, right, in the size compared to the long sheet, and then you have the top. Here he says, no, here it says it's going to be special. What does that mean? Hakaneh, which is the gibol, is going to be 3 or 4 times, right, from the shibolet, right, which means that's usually 3 or 4 times. This tebua, it was pishtaim in hakaneh. It was double the size of the kaneh, meaning usually it's 3 or 4 times. Yeah, that means you have 75, right, to 25%, right? That means 3 times to 1, or you have 4 to 1, right? 3 or 4. That's what it says. Pishlosha or ba'a mina shibolet. So if 3 or 4 times, right? That means you have the stick, which is not food. That's not food. Food is the top part, right? But that part is going to be either a 4th, right, or a 3rd, right? But however, though, he comes now and he says, right, what's happening over here? Now it's the opposite way around. That the food part is double, right, from the kaneh. Because it says that a kaneh is usually zeret. The shibolet is zratayim, meaning kafur, right? That means if the kaneh is 1 zeret, so then the shibolet is zratayim, is 2 zerets. So if it's double the size. Okay? Now, nekuda. Okay, now what's going to happen is as follows. We could have stopped there a bit, because this was all the same topic of the same pasuk, right? Going back and forth. But I didn't want to go that far last time, and then we wanted to do a lot of chazarot, so we stopped over here, and we did all the chazarot. Now, what's happening is as follows, right? Did you realize Rav Nachman asked the question to Rav Yitzchak, and Rav Yitzchak answered, right, with the words of Rav Yochanan. How did this start? Right? Amaleh Rav Nachman and Rav Yitzchak asked Rav Nachman to Rav Yitzchak, Echi yoreh b'nifsad, yoreh b'mal cheshvan, v'chule v'chule. He answered him, Rav Yitzchak answered him, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, capiche or not? How do we start the Gemara? Start the Gemara. Amaleh Rav Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak. How says Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak? What is Yoreh Nisan? Yoreh Zer Mar Cheshvan. So he comes in the beginning of the Gemara. So he comes and he says, right? Amaleh Hachkem Rabbi Yochanan answers Rabbi Yitzchak. This is what Rabbi Yochanan says. So now one more time. Question from Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak. Answers Rabbi Yitzchak in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, that is the Gemara, correct or not? And now the Gemara is going to do another 5 cases of deja vu. 5 cases of Rabbi Nachman asking Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rabbi Yitzchak answering with Rabbi Yohanan. Capish or not? 5 cases. Okay? We're going to start. Case number 1. Okay? We had the first one, which was the Gemara, which was connected to the Mishnah. Remember, whenever this happens, there was always a connection at the beginning. The connection at the beginning was, we said in the Mishnah, to do with Yoreh Malkosh in Nisan, and therefore Rabbi Nachman asked Rabbi Yitzchak, what, Yoreh is in Nisan? Yoreh is in Hechal. So he answered Rabbi Yochanan. Now the Gemara is going to go off topic. Right? Off topic, because every single one has nothing to do with what we spoke about beforehand. Nothing to do with it. What is the connection? Rabbi Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak answers, and then Rabbi Yochanan. Okay? Question number 1. Elmaleh Rabbi Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak. What does it mean in the pasuk? Here we're talking about during the famine, during the days of Elisha Nabi. Okay, so now beforehand, we were talking about the famine during the time of Eliyahu Hanavi, right? If you remember, that was the entire time that we spoke about that he went and he promised that there was not going to be any rain, there was not going to be any tal, and then we said, what? There's going to be tal, there was always tal. We said, no, there was no tal shebracha, so on and so forth, and he swore that was to do with Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi. Now we're talking about during the time of Elisha Hanavi. Huh? No. Yeah? So during the time of, right, Elisha Hanavi, right? It says over here like this. Ki kara Hashem lara'av vegam ba'a el haaretz sheva shanim. Okay? Let's translate the pasuk. Ki kara Hashem lara'av, when Hashem called it as for the famine. Yeah? Yeah, 1 second. Vegam ba'a el haaretz, right? And it came to the land sheva shanim, for 7 years. So says the Gemara, what does that mean? Vehanach sheva shanim, my achul. With these 7, remember, Sheva is 7, Shanim are years. My achul, what did they eat? Right? So that's what we have to understand. Again, one more time. Kikara Hashem Ra'av, when Hashem is calling to the famine, Ra'av is famine, right? When a person is Ra'ev, they're hungry. Right? V'gam ba'i la'ad Hashem Shanim, and he's going to come to the land for 7 years. What are they eating? Elmaleh comes Yitzchak. Again, one more time. Rav Nachman. Yeah, what's Hachi Amar Elmaleh, he answers him. Hachi Amar Yochanan, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. Shana Rishona. What is Shana Rishona? The first year. Achlu ma shebabatim, they ate what was inside the houses. They have in the houses. Sheniya, what's Sheniya? The second year. Achlu ma shebasadot, they ate that which they had in the field. Like Baruch. Shelishit, what is Shelishit? Third year. What? Yeah. What does that mean? Kosher meat. They eat kosher meat. Yeah. Rabbi eat. What does Rabbi eat? The 4th year. Non-kosher meat. Yeah, they have to eat non-kosher meat. There's no kosher meat left. They eat the non-kosher meat. Chamishit, the 5th year. Yeah, what do they eat in the 5th year? What is shkatim u'masim? Jukim. Jukim is jukim, creepy crawlers, bugs, insects. Correct. Yeah, everything, all these things. Yeah? Yeah, shishit. Yeah, exactly, the grasshoppers. Yeah, shishit, the 6th one. Yeah, it says really this. On the 6th one, right, on the 6th year, some of them have to eat besar benehem uvnotehem. What? Yeah. Yeah. This is the famine. Yeah. He says, Shishit, on the 6th year, some of them were even eating besar benehem uvnotehem, their children's flesh, right? They were eating their children. Should they eat on the 7th year? Some of them were eating besar benehem, their own arms, right? The flesh of their own skin. Lekayem Hashem Lemar, to fulfill that which is written in Yeshaya, Ish besar zero'o yocheli. A person will eat his own flesh. What does that mean? This is all to do with the explanation of what were they eating during 7 years. Next, second question. Elmaleh Rav Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak. Says Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak. What is the explanation in the pasuk? B'kidbecha kadosh velo avo ba'id. What does that mean? Right? He says because within you it's holy, and I'm not going to come to the city. So he says, what does that mean? Mishum b'kidbecha kadosh lo avo ba'id. How does that make sense? That Ki'ilu, that because you guys are going to be holy, you have Kiddusha, Hashem says, I'm not going to come to Yerushalayim to put my Shekhinah. The opposite. If you have Kiddusha in Israel, Hashem should be Masechet Shekhinah. What's going on? So Elmaleh, he comes and he answers him. This is what Rabbi Yochanan says. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Kadosh Baruch Hu to Israel, Lo avo b'Yerushalayim shel ma'ala, ad shavo l'Yerushalayim shel mata. I'm not going to go to Yerushalayim shel ma'ala. Where's Yerushalayim shel ma'ala? In the firmament, in the Shamayim. Until I'm going to come to Yerushalayim shel mata. That's what it means in the Eid, in the city. What does that mean? It says Yerushalayim shel ma'ala was, right, b'kibecha kadosh. What does that mean? Until there's going to be Kiddusha in Yerushalayim shel mata, that Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to build it and have Shekhinah, then he'll come to Yerushalayim shel ma'ala. So says the Gemara, Yerushalayim lemala. What is Yerushalayim up above? Answers the Gemara, in yes. It says in the pasuk, Yerushalayim abenuyah ke'ir shehu benala yachtav. What does that mean? Yerushalayim abenuyah ke'ir shehu benala yachtav. It means Yerushalayim, right, is going to be built just like the other city, which is twin, which is mechubar to it, which means that it's like dugmata. So therefore, where is that city? You're right that the dugmat Yerushalayim, it's not going to be Barakia. So obviously, right, there's going to be Yerushalayim shel mala. Okay.
So he never gives the answer from in the name of God.
One second. Elmaleh Rav Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak. Third one. Says Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak. What does it mean in the pasuk in Yirmiyahu? Ubeachat yiv'aru v'yichsalu musar havalim etzu. What does that mean? Right?
What do you mean?
Heaven is like nonsense, right? Abyss. So he says like this one more time. Ubeachat yiv'aru v'yichsalu. Yeah, he comes and he says, right? Musar havalim etzu. What does that mean? Elmaleh, he comes and he says like this. Hachim Rabbi Yochanan. Achat hi shemeva'eret l'shayim aginam. Right? What does that mean? There's one avirah which is going to cause the Rishayim to be burnt in Geinam. So here, even though we just said Yivaru means senseless, like Ishbar, lo yedau, lo yvinatzot, really be'emet, what are we talking about? Meva'eret. What is Meva'eret? Meva'eret means Lashon biur chametz, to destroy, to consume, fire. Right? They're burning. Rishayim Geinam. Mai, what is that? Avodah zarah. Why? Ketivach, but it's written over here in the pasuk, Musar avalim etzu. What does that mean? The musar of nonsense, right, is what? Is a piece of wood. And it's written over there, Hevel hima. What are they? They are nonsense. Masechet ta'atuim. That means avodah zarah is ta'atuim. So therefore, they're coming and say there's going ta'atuim is like delusions. Yeah, it's something negative, something bad. So he comes and he says, like, what are we talking about then? Right? So we're saying that there's going to be one type of an avirah which will actually come and destroy the Rishayim, right? It will burn the Rishayim in Geinam. What is that avodah zarah? What is that avirah? Avodah zarah. That is what the Gemara, right, says until here. So this is going to be the third one, okay? The fourth one, right? Elmaleh Rav Nachman Rabbi Yitzchak. Says Rav Nachman to Rabbi Yitzchak. What does it mean in the pasuk? Kishtayim ra'ot asa'ini. What does that mean, right? That they did two bad things. Meaning my nation did two negative things. So he says, he says what? They only did two averot. That's all that they did. Imagine, right? Somebody's going to come and say, he only did two averot. That's it. Only did two averot. So it's not that bad. That's not that bad. So he comes and he says, Esrim barba. He says, right, there was 24 averot that was written over there in the Navi in Yecheskel. Shvikalu. What? The mechulot lab? What? They were forgiven? What's going on? He's only mentioning two averot. What 2 avirot? There 24, right? What is shrika lu? What is shrika? Shavke. Savke. Savke. Where do we see Shavke? Elmaleh comes the answer. This is what Rabbi Yochanan says. Achat shehi he'amud bet shekula kishtayim. He says, no, you didn't understand. This is one of them, which are equal, right? You're right. Shekula, shakul, if you want a mishkal is a weight, but it means that it's equal. It's in the same value. It's the same weight, right? Like 2 avirot. What does that mean? There's one avera which has 2 ra'ot, which has 2 negative aspects. Mind, what is that? Avodah zarah. Which means we're not mentioning all the averot, because there weren't just 2 averot, there were 24 averot. But we're mentioning one avera which is equal, like many, which is equal like 2 averot. Tichtiv, it says in the pasuk, ki shetayim ra'ot asayim. There's 2 things, right? My nation's 2 negative things, right? These are ra'ot, is bad things, right? Asayim, asayim, my nation did. Oti azevu mekor ma'im chayim. They abandoned me. Oti, me, azevu, la'azov. Ta'azov oti. What is la'azov? Forsake, right? To forget about me. They abandoned me, right? Mekor ma'im chayim. The Kadosh Baruch Hu, the mekor. Mekor, it's a mekor b'necha. What is mekor? The fuente, the source of ma'im chayim, right? Of life, of water of life. Lachtzov lahem borot, right? They went and they were lachtzov lahem borot. Here they went and they what? Borot, right? Borot nishbarim. What does that mean? They went and they started coming and they started digging wells. Yes, but the wells were broken wells. Right? That's what he's coming and saying here. Which means, right? He comes and he says this: if they were going to come and put their emunah in something else, so they would have went and they did one bad thing. But now that they're coming and they're being Oziel emunah Hashem, which is mekor ma'im chayim, and they went after avodah zarah, that anyway, right? They are considered like wells, like pits, which are broken, and therefore they don't even get the water inside. So now they did two negative things now. Right now, it's not anymore one negative thing; it's 2 negative things. If a person wants to abandon Hashem, that's one thing. But he now abandons Hashem and he's going to go to avodah zarah that anyway it's like a broken pit, right? Well, what does that make sense? Okay, so he says, "Ki avru iye kitim uru vekedar shilchu v'bonenu me'od." Right? Hayemir goy elokim. Right? What does that mean? How do you want to translate this? That's uru is to see. Vekedar. Kedar is actually Ishmael, but let's see. Kedar is Ishmael. Shilchu. That means they're going to think about it. They're going to think about, ponder about it. They're going to come and they're going to see this. Right? What does that mean? Are they going to, right? In physicality. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What? He says, right? I mean goy elokim. What does that mean? Right? We're going to come and we're going to switch, right? Kedar is Ishmael. Yeah? So he comes and he says, I mean goy. Right? And they're not even a God. So my nation is like rebelling. They're switching my kavod without any help. Meaning like this, if you're already going to go from one thing to another, but it also helps, so okay, you could think to yourself, so okay, right, but if you're going for nothing, it doesn't make sense. Now the Gemara is going to say, Tana, the kitim, right? These are ovdim laesh, right? They serve the fire. Kadrayim, the kadaz, ovdim lamayim, they serve the water, right? Where do you see the water? Now they know that water turns off the fire. They didn't come and switch their gods. But my nation, they switched me for something that doesn't help. Which means like this, think about it. Water extinguishes fire, correct? So now 1 second. So then it should make sense that the Kittim, they serve the fire, right? They should switch their God, right, to the water, because the water extinguishes the fire. So therefore, the Kittim should become like the Kedarim, right? But they didn't do that. So Hashem says, if they didn't do that, right, why didn't they? No, because they don't switch their God. So he says, but my nation, they switched me, but to something that doesn't help. So because of that, it says the Avodah Zarah that Bnei Yisrael did, there's 2 averot. Because the Avot HaOlam, they don't switch their gods, even though they know that it's even much less. But my nation, Bnei Yisrael, they went and they switched their God, right? I was like, okay, right. But with what? Lo yu'il, with nothing. And therefore, when the Navi comes and it says that Shtayim Yaot Asani, we're not talking about 2 different averot. It was one averah, which is considered like 2, because they did 2 bad things when they did the averah. Because to abandon God, that's one thing. Okay, that's one averah. They did 2 bad things. What is the 2 bad things? They went and they abandoned Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So this was going to be the 4th one. Yeah, he comes and he says like he says like this one more time. The way that we started today was we were talking about Noseh Meshech Hazara. So we went and we said, you remember we were talking about the ox. And when the ox was going forwards, it was crying because it didn't have what to eat. And then afterwards, when he was coming back, all of a sudden he was eating, so he was very happy. So everyone was jolly. All of a sudden, the Gemara says, what does it mean, Noseh Mutar? So he says, usually, when you have the stalk and then you have the grain, the stalk is it's nothing. The food part, meaning the bottom part, is not food. The food part is the top part, right? The kernels. That's where you have all the seeds in it. There, it's very, very small. All the rest, the reed, right? There's nothing there. Since here, there was a miracle that even though usually it's going to be 3 or 4 times the size, and you have 3 times the size of the stalk, right? The height, right? This is during the time of yes, during the time of the So what happened is that all of a sudden you had that it was double the size, meaning that the food part was double the size of the reed, right? Usually the reed part is 3 or 4 times the size of the food part. Here all of a sudden it was double the size. The food part was double the size the reed part. Okay? Yes, a lot of food. Okay? Nikuda. Now that we finished that sugya, we started today's daf. Today's daf, even though this part was just already the new, right? But we have to know. You listening? Yeah. So he comes in and says this. So he says, Rav Nachman, right? Remember, how do we start our Gemara? Our Gemara started by Rav Nachman, right? Asking Rabbi Yitzchak a question, right? So Rabbi Nachman asks Rabbi Yitzchak a question. Rabbi Yitzchak answers in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And that's how we started. He started, is Yoreh, right? In Nisan. Yoreh is in Mar Cheshvan. Yeah? Yoreh is in Mar Cheshvan. Right? It's not Nisan. It's in Mar Cheshvan. So what did he answer? He comes and he answers, no, you're right. This happened during the days of Yoel. In the days of Yoel, the Yoreh was during Nisan. Why? The first rain fell when? What day? What was the first day? The first rain. Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Yeah? Chazara. Yeah? Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So therefore, right? So he comes and he says, one second, yeah? So Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So now the Gemara comes and the Gemara says as follows. Yeah? Okay. Yeah? Go ahead, then you want afterwards. Says the Gemara, right? One more time. Right? The Gemara says, right? Rav Nachman comes and he tells Rabbi Yitzchak. So now that we just mentioned Rav Nachman to Yitzchak, we're answering in the name of Yochanan. We're going to go through now another 5 series of questions, right? Which we only did 4 right now. We did 5 series of questions to do with this. Question number 1 was, what does it mean in the pasuk that when it's going to come a famine for 7 years? What in the world did they eat for 7 years? You know what it is famine for 7 years? What did they eat for 7 years? So again, Rabbi Yitzchak answers the name of Yochanan. You know what they did? Very simple. The first year, they eat which was in the house. Second year, in the field. Third year, kosher animals. Fourth year, non-kosher animals. Fifth year, shkasim masim, creepy crawlers, insects, bugs. That's right. That was the 5th year. 6th year, the flesh of their own children. The 7th year, his own flesh of his own arms. And therefore, that's why the pasuk says, okay? Fine. So that was the first Gemara. So basically, he had a question, and he answered, what's the explanation of the pasuk, right? And that's what they had. שנייה. Yeah? ואמר לרב נחמן לרבי יצחק. Says Rab Nachman to Yitzchak, question number 2. Question number 2. Yeah? מה תכתיב? What does it mean in the pasuk? וקרבך קדוש ולא עבור בעיר? What does that mean? Because within you, you're going to be holy. I'm not going to come in the city. He says, no. Because, how does that make sense? Because it's וקרבך קדוש, you're not going to come to the city. It's the exact opposite. If you have Kiddusha, you should come into the city. So what is the answer? It says, no. It says, this is what Rabbi Yochanan says. Again, Rabbi Yitzchak is answering Rabbi Yochanan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not going to come in Yerushalayim Shel Mala until I come in Yerushalayim Shel Mata. Right? That means when I'm going to come and I'm going to recite in Yerushalayim Shel Mata, then I'm going to recite in Yerushalayim Shel Mala. Right? What does that mean? That means it says, Lo avo ba'ir, I'm not going to come to the city until Shabikid Becha Kodesh. We have to flip the pasuk. The pasuk says, Bekid Becha Kadosh, Velo avo ba'ir. Opposite. I'm not going to come into the Eid until Bekid Becha Kadosh. Meaning that when you guys are going to have the Kiddusha, Polo Mata, and Yerushalayim Shel Mata, I'm going to be in Yerushalayim Shel Mala. So says the Gemara, there's Yerushalayim Shel Mala, there's Yerushalayim up above. Answers the Gemara, yes, because it says Yerushalayim B'nuyah. What does that mean? That there's Yerushalayim is going to be built just like the city which is parallel to it, which is connected to it. What does it mean, Yachdav? That it's parallel, which are the twin city, the exact same way. What is that? Yerushalayim Shel Mala, Yerushalayim Shel Mata. Third question. V'amar le Rab Nachman le Yitzchak. Says Rab Nachman to Yitzchak. What does it mean in the pasuk? He says, what does it mean that the people became all foolish, right? And then all of a sudden, what's going to happen is they become all foolish. It is going to have, right? Musar avalim is etz. It's a piece of wood. What are we referring to over here? He says, no, this is what it means to say. Achati. It says ubachat. With one of them, they're going to become senseless. They're going to be foolish. He says, no. In one of them, they're going to be ba'eret. Bar here does not mean bar. Right? Ish bar lo yeda. Usi lo yavyin eto. What does it mean? An ish bar. A person that he's a bar. A second. A bar is a person that's foolish. Right? Just like a ksil. Right? Ish bar lo yeda. Usi lo yavyin eto. And the ksil is not going to understand this. So what does that mean? Here it says, achati shemeva'eret l'shaim v'geina. There's going to be one Avirah which is going to burn the Reshaim in Gehinnom. What is that Avirah? Avodah Zarah. How do you know that? Because it says, Musar Avalim Etzu. He says the Musar of nonsense is what? Is Etz. It's made out of wood. What are we referring to? He says, we're talking about over there, Hevel Hema Masechet Twin. Avodah Zarah is Etz Va'evel. Right? It says in the Devarim, Etz Va'evel. V'atem Sham Elokim Acherim. Etz Va'evel. Shel which parasha? No. Yes. Right? One. Somebody, Rav Nachman, tells of Yitzchak. What does it mean in Pasuk Shtaim Naot Osaymi? That there were 2 negative things that my nation did. Says the Gemara, what? There's only 2 things. But they said the 24 things there in the Navi Yecheskel. Right? So what? Shvikalu, what? They were forgiven. They just left them behind that kilu lo karakrum. Right? Shvikalu. They just left it there. It says, this is what Rabbi Yochanan says. It was 1 negative thing that was shakul, like 2 negative things. What is that? 5b. He says, what is that? Why? As it said in the Pasuk Shtaim Naot Osaymi, they did 2 negative things to me. That they went and they abandoned me, which I am the Mekor Mayim Chayim, the Mekor. What is the Mekor? The source of Mayim Chayim, of like the to come and to make these wells, which are all broken. It's written over there, right? Why? Are they going to come? Right? Is that you're machlif, you're switching, right? You're exchanging one with another. So he comes and says, what? They're going to switch their gods. They're not even gods. My nation. They did switch something that's not going to help. What does that mean? They said the Kittim, they come and they serve the fire. Kidrim, they serve the water. And even though that they know that the water turns off the fire, they didn't switch their gods. But my nation, right, they came and they did switch me without anything which actually helped. So that was the 4th one. Later, we continue with the 5th one.